All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another Grow Your Mind chat session brought to you by Activate and Paklaunch. Before we begin, just a little intro to myself. My name is Anam Sethi, and I'm a trainer and consultant at Activate, which is a leadership development consultancy and a soft skill training firm based out of Pakistan. We have, worked with clients across the board in communication skills, leadership development, values rollouts, leadership competency models, all of that stuff. And I am so excited to be here today and share yet another amazing story from one of our very own Pakistani entrepreneurs. Paklaunch needs no introduction. I think we're all quite familiar. In fact, Paklaunch is the reason why we are here today and why I got to connect with Abdul. For those of you who are joining in, Paklaunch is a platform that continuously drives the Pakistani entrepreneurial and investment ecosystem and has been a great enabler in connecting people across geographies, bringing people together, creating lots of value for our country and driving entrepreneurial ventures forward. So welcome to all of you. A little bit about the topic, and then we will move on to our mentor for the day. Last year at this time, we were all pretty confused as to what was going to happen. And I think I can safely say that we are all still very much confused about what will happen next. And it's a great time, to be in the industry because everyone is now playing a role in shaping what the future will be. And I think that's really where the value of all of this lies, because we can work together to create the new normal. It's not something that's defined. We've never seen it. I haven't seen it. You haven't seen it, but we can play a huge role in making it whatever we want to be. And helping us do that and helping us deal with all of this uncertainty and all of these challenges that we've perhaps, never even seen before is our mentor, Abdul Munim Sheikh. I'll give a very brief official introduction and then I'll, shoot it over to Abdul to take the lead. Abdul Munim Sheikh, he's the president and CEO of ALSAFA Foods, which, if you live in North America, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. Before this, he was the head of finance and planning at Engro Corp. He has played a huge role in turning businesses over, managing multi-million-dollar budgets, growing business across geographies, creating very sustainable partnerships, and leading innovation for his business. So Abdul, thank you so much for being here. And I'd love to hear from you, to talk to the audience and tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you, Anam, and Ali specifically, and Paklaunch and Activate in general. I'm very pleased and excited to be part of this discussion. I think it's an amazing platform, and I got to know Ali very recently, and since then, I mean, the way conversations have evolved, I'm very excited, and it seems very promising platform, and great work is being done. Actually, a friend of mine, Farooq Haves, introduced me to Ali, and I mean, thanks to Farooq for that intro. And I think it's amazing job is being done, and I must appreciate, especially living in North America outside Pakistan, you get more patriotic, and you want to see more good things about Pakistan. And I think it's one of the good things, and it is one of the conversation topics among my family and friends when we sit together. So in recent times, this is something good to talk about Pakistan. So thanks for the opportunity, and I'm very excited to share my story with you.
All right, lovely. And Abdul, before we get into your story, I have one quick question for you. Can you tell us one unique thing about you? It could be a hobby, a talent, a skill that most people don't know.
I'm a runner, and I love running, and people who have known me since my college days or school days, I mean, they might know about this, but mostly people don't know about it. And it is kind of a meditation for me, and it is my go-to exercise as well. So I love running, and that's my hobby as well as my pastime.
It's actually a great hobby to have. I wish I was also a runner. I'm not. Can be very useful in life. But having said that, Abdul, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here for Pakistan, for all of us across the world. So let's dive straight into your story, and go back to when you were younger in your teenage years. What was the first job that you ever had?
In teenage, obviously, I didn't have any job. I was studying most of the time. So I did my initial education from Cadet College Hassan Abdal, and then I moved to FAST Lahore. I graduated from FAST in 2003. And people in the industry would know that that was probably one of the worst time to graduate from a computer sciences school because there were no jobs at all.
Wow.
So at that time, a group of friends, as a group of friends, we decided to decide on an alternate career path, and we came up with with an idea that we should pursue an MBA degree. And during our last semester, we started pursuing that, and in the process, I got admitted to IBA Karachi. And a few of my friends went to LUMS, and few went abroad, but I went to IBA. So IBA was a very exciting experience for me. I had, for most of my life, I have lived academic life, I would say. I lived outside my home in boarding, but Karachi was an exciting experience for me. And in many ways, it was very different from my previous experience. So I always say that Karachi has been very kind, and even it has a very special place in my heart. And the way Karachi embraced me, IBA embraced me, and afterwards, most of my professional career is in Karachi. So I have a very high regard for Karachi. When I graduated from IBA, and as I mentioned that I had never lived with my parents or at my home, which is Muzaffargarh. There was a kind of inclination internally to somehow be able to go back, but I knew back of my mind that there would be no opportunities there, which I would want to pursue. But so I was one of the top 3 in my MBA class. So Engro at that time picked me for an interview. And when during the interview, I mean, it was a regular interview, but the person at that time who was the general manager for agri businesses, Khalid Mir Saab, he asked me, what do you want? What do you immediately want from your career? I said that if there is a good career which can keep me close to my parents for a little bit, I would really appreciate that. And then he asked me, where they are? And so I told him that they are in Muzaffargarh. And so he said, fortunately, we have a position in Muzaffargarh at that time, but it is a sales position. It's a very tough area. You are coming from IBA. You would not want to go to a village or a fertilizer dealer. You won't like it. I said it's okay as long as I get to stay close to my parents. It would be a good opportunity. So that's how I that was my decision making process, which was very emotional at that time. There was no logic behind it, but it was very on the spot and on the go. Once I joined there, it was definitely much tougher than I would have anticipated. Although I belong from that city or village or town, but working there was a totally different experience, especially coming out of IBA. So you would expect a very multinational environment or a corporate setup, which was not there. But it taught me in many different ways, many different things which I would not have learned in any corporate office. So I was there for a little over a year, 1 year and a month. And then they moved me in a supply chain at their Dharki plant in Interior Sin,
right,
which was another very good experience. Those of you who would have seen Engro or Fauji fertilizer plants, I mean, they are a city in their own, and there is a very different culture.
Absolutely. And, Abdul, you and I were talking about this as well. So I actually had the privilege of spending a week, just a week at Harki. We were doing a few sessions for Engro at the time. And, you're right. It really is a very self-sufficient place. And, how was that transition from you? I understand that a sales job is very hands-on and there's a lot of travel and a lot of movement and a lot of, meeting new people and being on the road. So what is that, what was that transition from like a sales job to being in a very, community-based environment and secure environment like Dharki?
I would say it was mostly it was an upgrade, but there was only one thing that was a downside of that job was it was a 24/7 job. So because the plant runs 24/7 and being in the supply chain, if you're heading the supply chain, you have to be, and especially at Dharki, in any manufacturing facility, safety is a big concern. So because we were heading all the logistics, external vendors, so if anything happens at any point, any time of the day or night, they would call me to come sort it out. And that had its own challenging, but I think the biggest learning for me at that job was the intensity of work. So it was very, very, very intense, and it never stopped. As far as the lifestyle and the living conditions are concerned, those were much, much better. It was a much bigger upgrade. We had our daughter there, so we have lovely memories from that place. My wife really enjoyed the time. My daughter, she spent 1 year there, so we had a very good time in general. So again, I was there just for a year, and then I moved to head office, which was in Karachi, and that was the plan since the very beginning. But Engro had a very good grooming, I would say, platform where they would rotate people in different departments, cities, if they find people to have a leadership potential, so they would throw different challenges on them. And I think that was a very, very good, and they inherited this philosophy from Exxon, because Engro was Exxon previously. So in my view, there were some challenges at that time because of this philosophy, because you don't remain very hireable candidate other than Engro, because nobody sort of recognizes that a journalistic mindset, the way Engro grooms you. But within Engro, you are appreciated a lot. And if you can do more than one job, you are appreciated a lot. So when I moved to head office, my first assignment was the brand management for the fertilizer business. Is one of their major, second biggest after the urea. It's called phosphates. It's one of the second biggest portfolio. So I was there for like 2 years, and I was looking after import and export. It was heavily linked with the international commodity pricing. So a lot of analytical work was there, very different from what I had done before. That's where I sort of partially at Dherki and mostly in the phosphate business, I came to work very closely with Asad Umar, and that's where sort of I built my rapport with him. By then it was established that in Engro terminology, they used to call it a high potential people. So, so by then, and those are sort of within the talent pool, they are one of the elite group. So by then I was part of that high potential group. And now the purpose was that the CEO's main mandate is to sort of groom their career. So one day Asad called me in and he gave me 4 options to sort of, and the 4 options were go back to Dherki as a business economics engineer, become an HR comp and ben person. And then at that time we had launched Engro Foods. So It was a very glamorous job, and it was a very upcoming thing, and it was a lot of hype was there within the organization, outside the organization. So a lateral movement move in brands on Allpers, or the ice cream brand at that time was Omo. And the last option was they were setting up at this Engro Corp structure. So the last option was the finance, to set up the finance shop in the corporate setup. So Asad gave me a day to think about it, and he gave me different justification for each job, that what are the pros and cons for the jobs. So when I thought about it, on a spectrum of difficulty, or I saw that the finance is the most difficult one. So, and at that time, I thought that I think I'm young enough to afford a couple of mistakes now. So I think I should go for this kind of a job, which is the most difficult one. And that's the exact reasoning, quote unquote, I would say. I told to us that there is only 5% chance that I would be successful in this job. But I know if I'm successful, then the reward will be much bigger. Much bigger. So the proportionate, it is a lot more in proportion to other jobs. So that was my thought process, and Asad really appreciated it. And I set up that department, and then I hired different people, and I mean, it grew into a much bigger and much active role in the overall strategy of the Engro, all of the Engro businesses, whether it was polymer. And that was an amazing experience. So coming from a fertilizer business, which was the core business of Engro at that time, that's in that finance role, I got the opportunity to learn a lot of different businesses, whether it was plastic, which is polymer, whether it was foods, whether it was, at that time, Engro also had a IT company in Lahore, Evension, by the name of Evension. So whether and they divested it afterwards. So it was a very, very different experience. So and in a single day, I would be looking at so many different businesses.
Right.
So that I would say was the beginning of thinking entrepreneurially. And when I was and then one day, Asad decided to sort of move on and resign from Engro. And during the same time, he sort of pushed my name for this business in North America. So it was a very small business at that time, but I called one of my friends, Murtaza Sikandar. He was, I mean, my IBA fellow. So I asked him, I mean, I said that I'm a almost $2 billion business. I'm looking so many different businesses. But I'm going into a much smaller role, although the role is bigger, but the business is much smaller. So the rationale he gave me stuck with me. And he said that the businesses you are in, it is very unlikely that you can do something of your own in those businesses, because the entry barrier is very high. But the business you are going into, it is somewhat biteable for you. And if maybe in near future, you can set up your own business of similar kind, or maybe it will bridge your gap from corporate to your entrepreneurial aspirations.
Right.
And that was the main reason for me to get this job at Engro Foods Canada. It was called, that was the name at that time. And now it's ALSAFA Foods. So that's how I sort of landed into Canada, and the journey goes on from there.
That's, that's actually a really wonderful story, Abdul. And, when we were having our first conversation, the one thing that really stood out in this story, in your journey before ALSAFA Foods, is that there was a lot of movement between roles that were new to you, and the spirit that you approached those roles and you were able to take that on. In your opinion, where did that come from, and what motivated you to constantly take risks and try something new?
I would generally call myself not a very risk-oriented person, but I'm good at jumping on a very calculated risk. So I always sort of put things in perspective. So if for example, when I was evaluating the role, whether to take on the finance role or not. So the downside was very low and the upside was very high. So in my view, it was a risky decision. It would require me to work really, really hard. I will become a lot more vulnerable. By that time, I was in the corporate annual ranking. I was on top of the charts. So I was becoming more vulnerable, but at the same time, the upside was very, very high. So as I said earlier, there was only 5% chance that I would be successful in that. And I would not call myself a finance geek I mean, my colleagues and the people who were reporting to me, they had a much core, on the core subject, they had a much bigger knowledge base than me. And the reason I was able to lead them or work with them and add value was that I had a very holistic picture about the business. So I started from the very bottom, how a small fertilizer dealer thinks about business, and then sort of scale that up to Engro or Engro Polymer or Engro Foods. So because essentially, if you are running a retail shop or if you are running a $20 billion business, the business dynamics the core is very similar. So the decision making is very similar. Everyone wants to grow their revenue. Everyone wants to reduce their cost. Everyone wants to improve their profitability. So, so I would sort of bring in, I would say, for the lack of better words, I would say common sense to the analysis. So nice. How a basic businessman would think about it. And that used to, in the beginning, when I used to present that analysis, so that was very different from a very typical analysis or the formats which were being followed at that time. And they used to, other than specifically Rohail Muhammad, who was the CFO of the corp at that time. So they used to really appreciate the analysis and that it comes with a business perspective. And one of the reasons which Rohail told me, that it is very easy to explain it to the board members because all the board members are not finance savvy. So it gives them a very simplistic way of explaining and sort of communicating what are the challenges with the business. So rather than doing the analysis and paralysis of the situation, it gives them a layman terminology or vocabulary to explain what are the challenges and what are the fixes. So, and I built on that. In my view, I always used to think, I think this courage came from definitely from Engro, but living in the boarding for like more than 12 years, figuring out your own life, different challenges. I think that if I look back and I want to pin down, so that would be my experience, which really is helpful in managing transitions and changes at a very high speed. But Engro definitely groomed me, and they also at the same time gave me tools to handle change and add value at the same time. It was a great opportunity for me to learn those tricks that early. Otherwise, I mean, I would have struggled in my own business now. But that risk taking. So, in short, I was not a natural risk taker, but I was groomed into someone who can take and evaluate risks, and when it is appropriate, I would take action. So I would call myself that I like to, I'm good in decision making. So I don't, and I think that is a very important trait. No matter how many analysis you do, no matter how many sort of opinions or advice you get, at the end of the day, you have to take a call. And there will never be a perfect scenario. There will never be perfect information available. At the end of the day, it is your gut feel. So I'm good in that. So that part I always was good with. I am able to analyze things very quickly, and I'm able, once I analyze, I take decisions. I have clarity in my mind what is the way I want to go. But I'm not a natural risk taker. So Engro definitely groomed me to be someone who can handle risk.
That's absolutely wonderful, and it's so kind of you to admit that, because I think a lot of us would like to think of ourselves as risk takers, but it is a tricky process, and it can be very daunting when you are faced with a decision, like, for example, the decision to choose between 4 possible ways to go. And in those situations, I want to highlight 2 things that you said, which I think can be very beneficial, especially for our entrepreneurs as they grow their teams, which is, opening your teams up to change. Because like you said, not all of us are born risk takers, and not all of us are, prepared to handle change. And enabling that kind of environment can really help, even your younger team members grow into, and reach their full potential. So that's absolutely a great learning from, this little discussion that we've had. But, let's go on. Yeah, sorry.
I would definitely call myself a reluctant entrepreneur. So I was not a born entrepreneur. I evolved into being an entrepreneur. And in my view, because it is very important to understand, and if you would have, when I was graduating from IBA in 2005, if you would have asked me, I would have never replied that I would become an entrepreneur in one day. So it was not in my vision, or at that time, I didn't think that that is a skill set I possess. But it is very important to understand that these skill sets are acquirable. You can learn those, and you can evolve into someone who can take risk. And I mean, whether it's taking risk, whether it's leading innovation, and most of the time, you don't have to be everything. You have to have the right team in place. For example, I mean, if I'm not a risk taker, so I would have someone in my team who is good at risk taking. And then as a CEO or as a leader, my objective would be to build that trust between myself and that person, and trust his risk taking abilities or her risk taking abilities. So you can compensate those lackings or shortcomings when it comes to running a business. So you don't have to be everything, and a very few people are born with those skills. In my view, most of people like me acquire those skills, and those are acquirable.
That's perhaps, the lesson of the day. Because a lot of us, especially myself, I'll speak about myself, we sometimes feel that, we don't have the skills or the courage to go ahead and do things that might be uncertain to us, that we don't know what the outcome would be. And to know that we can acquire those skills and we can constantly grow is a great message. So thank you for that. But, here we are, right? You've just moved to Canada, and it's a new place, it's a new environment. What's going through your mind right now?
So not much. I mean, obviously, I was excited to be here, but during my first, I landed in on 28th November 2012, And November and December is normally our corporate planning cycle. So in that December, when of 2012, Asad had already left the organization. So the new leadership was there. And in that particular, so my first month of planning, they decided that we want to close this business. So within a week, and by then my family had not moved. So when I used to talk to my wife back home, so I would call, maybe you don't need to come here. I mean, I think save the hassle, and I might come back in a couple of months. And so, but the turn of the events was, and it was nothing with the, definitely the Canadian or the North American business was giving some troubles at that time. And the new, but the philosophy Asad had was very different from the philosophy the new management had, and both had I mean, in their own perspective, both had a right approach. So Asad's view of this business was a stepping stone for a global expansion. And the global expansion was not only for the businesses or revenue, it was also for talent pool. So it was a big sort of leap of faith for Asad to go into a much smaller business. I mean, every other business was a billions of rupees, and this was a relatively a smaller business at that time. So, but the new management didn't subscribe to the idea at that time, and they decided that we want to focus on our Pakistan expansions, and we don't want to look globally. So that was a very sort of initially very demotivating, that I have just landed here and I wanted to explore and grow the business, and I was not even given a chance. But I think looking back, that was one of the best opportunities presented to me. So, but at that time, I was not able to realize it that way. So they took the decision that ultimately we will sort of get out of this business, but a date was not set at that time. So the date was set the following year, same month, December, which was the corporate planning cycle. So 2013, December, they set the date as well, that by December 2014, we don't want the Canadian business on our balance sheet. I was given the opportunity, or I was assigned the task to find the buyers for the business and divest this business. So during the process of the business, it was bleeding money. It was bleeding money left, right, center. I mean, we will have to have a different session to explain why it was bleeding money and what went wrong. But there were a lot of management mistakes. There were a lot of business challenges. Environment was very different. The business environment was very different. So in December 13, I was given a date that by December 14, we want you back in Pakistan. And these are the couple of positions where you will go. At that time, Engro was setting up the Sindh Engro coal plant. So I was given the opportunity. I mean, it was shared with me that is the CFO post that you would be going into, and we need to raise financing and everything. So be prepared. I mean, if you can wrap things up in 6 months, that would be ideal, but at max within 12 months. So during the process, when I was looking at the different prospective buyers and meeting with them, so there was a private equity group out of Saudi Arabia, and they were very interested. And the lead consultant there was a Canadian Pakistani. So he had lived here. He knew the brand. So when we met, I mean, they said that we are very interested in the business, but we don't have someone to run the business. So by then I had graduated from the concept of being a corporate employee for whole of my life. So by then the inclination was to have something of my own. So I asked them that I can only come on board if I invest personally and I have a sort of stake in the business as well. So that's what I did. And I resigned from the Engro at that time. My paperwork was also in the process for the Canadian, so the permanent residency was also in the process. So that's when, so November 1st, 2014, I formally took over the business as the managing partner of the business. It was a very, very, very risky transaction. Just to put it in perspective, that it was bleeding so much money that Engro was not, it was raising eyebrows at Engro head office as well. So for a private equity or for my personal investment, which was everything I had saved by then, so it was my life saving. So we could lose, the burn rate was such that we could lose all of our investment in 6 months. So it was just that, the burn rate was very high. But there was a conviction that things can be turned around and things we can do better than this. Because I was in the business and I knew few things about it, but I was mostly looking the finance. So I had not experienced sales by then. I had not experienced marketing. So 2014 onwards, obviously the main objective at that time was to break even the business. And we did that in the first few months. And since then, we started to sort of grow our revenue stream. The journey is, very exciting, but and there were a lot of small components to the growth, but there were a couple of core things which in our strategy we changed that. So when I was acquiring the business, even my ex-boss from Engro, that he called me that you have made the decision, and are you sure about it? So I said that I don't have the whole staircase, but I can see the first step. So so that was my exact answer. So he said, after listening to that, he said, I think you will be able to pull it off. And I admitted to him that I don't have all the answers at the moment. And I will figure it out, but I know that I can figure it out during the course of next few months. So the competition, especially in Canada, was very tough, that all our competitors were sub-units of much bigger organizations. So everyone used to think that how would a small company would survive in the face of much bigger organizations. Although they're small, their halal business, which ALSAFA does, is mostly halal meat business, value-added meat. For the lack of better words, I would say in Pakistan, I would say, let's take the example of KNN. So it is a somewhat very similar business. But for us to survive against them, one thing which was which we picked as a team was that we can innovate at a much faster pace than our competition, no matter how big they are. But our pace of innovation can be much bigger because their processes are very bureaucratic and they need to take a lot of different approvals. And what we had decided at that time, 3-4 simple rules for product innovation. So we gave a very broad guideline, and within that guideline, we used to sort of see and maneuver our product development. So just to give you an example, that when we acquired, we had about 18 to 20 SKUs all across North America. And our competition also had more or less same number of SKUs. Today, we have 120 SKUs and they have about 25 SKUs. So our pace of innovation was very, very high. And that's how we were able to forge partnerships with our major customers like Walmart or Loblaws, the biggest retailers in North America. Because for them, we were very small, but they were really appreciative of our pace of innovation. So every year we would bring in 10, 20 products every year without fail. And somehow we came up with, and a lot of those products were not successful, to be honest. But we designed a mechanism that our failure would not derail our overall growth. So it will not be that damaging. So, and we will quickly prune the products and move on to new products. So next year we will again launch 10 products. 5 of them would be very, very successful. 10 would be okay, and 5 would be failures. So, and we would not be very emotional about it. We will discontinue those products. We'll fix those, either fix those or discontinue those. And then next year we'll come up with the new products. And to date, we keep on, every year we do that. So, and it's a continuous innovation process. So, so one theme which we picked was innovation, where we can outpace our bigger competitors. The other was the Canadian brands were very scared of the US market at that time. Right. And we said that, and they were very scared that the halal industry in US was very much scattered. In Canada, the Muslim population is very much concentrated in one province, and that is not the case in US. So the supply chain is very difficult, or in other words, cold chain is very difficult to manage in US. So, but we took the risk and we said that we are a Canadian company. We already had the US business, but our footprint was very small. And we said that we will cover the whole of US, and we developed the supply chain, distributor partnerships. And a lot of, I mean, I know most of our competition or their VPs. So when we would meet, they would say that, I mean, it's a very risky strategy. You will kill yourself and this and that. You might be able to sell you a product, but you won't be able to collect the receivables and this and that. But Alhamdulillah, I mean, now when we acquired the business, US was a smaller chunk of our business. Now US is a much bigger chunk of our business. So because the population was bigger, the opportunity was bigger. Again, the same philosophy, which that the downside was low and the upside was very, very big. So that was, so even if we would have failed, and there was an equal chance of failure there, but even if we would have failed, we would not have lost that much of money, but the upside was very big. And that gave us a first mover advantage with respect to the Canadian companies. And they still have not figured out or replicated our US expansion model. And that is our, I can say, claim to fame, that we are one of the, I think one of the very few companies in ethnic space, not otherwise, in ethnic space, who have a very good distribution North America wise. And then obviously the other components were building the trust with the customer, and especially in a halal business, that was very, very important. And that was very core to our sort of philosophy. And we run things with great integrity, and we don't compromise on that at all. And that was something I knew from the very beginning. And I would give a lot of credit to Engro as well. I mean, they really sort of groom you in a way that the ethics come at the forefront of your every decision. So we wanted to be very ethical in our way of doing business. So, and that's what we did. One thing which, when we were acquiring business, so a lot of our distributor partners, they thought either we will fire them because of their performance, and or we'll discontinue business with them. So I always believe that 90% of the time you can fix your partnership. So I am a great believer in not letting go of the partnership. So Alhamdulillah, we have saved most of our distribution and actually grew more than that. And whenever there are conflict of interest or the objectives are not being met, we really work with them to sort of achieve our objectives, and rather than just terminating them or letting go our, when it comes to employees, similar philosophy we follow. So I'm a strong believer of long-term partnerships, and that's what is paying off now, especially during the COVID, when there was so much uncertainty.
Right.
So our distributors, our customers, whether it's whether our customers at the scale of Walmart or even a mediocre level customer, they stood by us. So whatever the supply chain challenges were there or we are facing at the moment, as you might know, globally, it's a very crunch time for supply chain. But I mean, they have faith in us. And we have supported them, and it is in my view, I always like to say this to our partners, that we are in it together. So either we will swim or we will sink, we will be together. So 99% of the time we are successful, and we are able to save our partnerships and rather grow businesses with them. Even, I mean, when I talk to my distributors, they are amazed on the journey of growth they have experienced in the past 5 and 7 years. And when I look back, and when I used to travel in US, so my first job, which was the managing the fertilizer distributors in Muzaffargarh district, that comes very handy because it is somewhat similar. So I had never, that was my only experience in sales. So so my approach in sales is very different, I would say, not difficult. I subscribe to the idea of teaching and educating rather than selling. So I don't sell the product, I just educate them about the opportunity or about the features, about how we can grow the business, how they can benefit from it. So it is slightly a different approach, but in my view, that is the only approach I know of. And it has worked in our favor.
That's, Abdul, some great learnings that I would highlight from this journey that you've just shared with us. Number one being that, in order to grow a business, that trust that you've been talking about, creating those networks and connections can be so crucial. And, another thing I want to really highlight here is something that you mentioned when you said that when COVID came and the pandemic came, your partners were willing to stand up for that. And, I wanted to dig a little deeper. I know we're, towards the end of the session, but I want to dig a little deeper because, of course, like you said, your network and your process has not yet been replicated. So there must be something, that makes it more challenging than perhaps the easy way out. And so how do you feel that you have been able to effectively tackle those challenges, and what advice can you give to budding entrepreneurs who are currently in that situation and wondering how to figure out their supply chain?
Okay. So for example, in Canada or US, both more or less with a week difference, the lockdown happened on 12th of March last year.
Right.
So that was the time nobody knew how the market will react, how the food market or food and beverage market would react. But most of the competition, our competition, they started to reduce their productions. And when I spoke with my partners, they assured me that, and I was of the view that we should do the otherwise, and I could be wrong, but they assured me that even if you are wrong, we will stand by you. And we went exactly opposite of our competition, and we ramped up our production in the first week. And that nobody had that clarity in that. It was again a very risky move at that time. So nobody knew how the market will react. And ultimately in a month's time, it was very clear that food shortages were happening. So it became very clear. But by then we had procured huge raw material. We had procured huge production. But that confidence came from the customers that even if you are wrong, we will stand by you. So, and in my view, I think having a and that's the benefit of having a long-term partnership,
Right.
because you know each other, and you look out for each other all the time, because you are not there on a transactional basis. So I don't want to. I don't like to do business on a transactional basis, and in my view, the only way, even if you are meeting that customer for, I mean, once in your lifetime, but that sort of either the word of mouth or the goodwill sort of transcends from one customer to another customer to another. So a lot of opportunities have come our way just because of word of mouth. That definitely helped our brand ALSAFA and also our organizational brand in North America. So as far as the supply chain challenges are concerned, I think we have adapted ourselves on a sort of a day-to-day basis. We used to, for example, we used to have bi-weekly operational meetings. So since the very beginning of the pandemic, we knew that the operational part will become a big chunk of our day-to-day sort of work. So we moved from a bi-weekly operational meetings to a daily operational meeting. So on a daily basis, we are tweaking our operations and bringing in efficiencies. We are taking input of our customers almost on a daily basis. So whether it's come to Walmart, and we learn from our customer. For example, Walmart shares a lot of data with their vendors. So, and then there is a little bit of foresight into their data for up to like 2 to 3 weeks. So we sort of get a lot of information from that and build that information into rest of our business. So using that data is important. So because they are definitely much more advanced than us. So we use their data and leverage that data to rest of our customers and educate other customers. So it and also for us, the biggest concern was that the customer should not suffer. And in between, for us, the most important thing was to have a very consistent experience for the customer. So on the back end, we made a lot of compromises in terms of margins, not the quality, obviously, but in terms of margins, in terms of the hard work we have put in. So everything else was secondary to us. For us, a consistent experience, a consistent quality experience of the customer was important. So everything, when you put that objective in front of you, everything else becomes secondary and the decision making becomes very easy. So if you are getting a hit on your margin, it is a temporary thing, it will go away. But if you are getting hit on the experience of the consumer or the customer, that is not temporary. That is a long-term problem. So, and we sort of manage in that way that we will take temporary hits, but will not take a long-term hit, which was obviously our customer.
That's, a great learning for all of us. It's also a really great lesson in how to establish trust. And one thing I want to highlight is, putting your objective in front of you and then understanding that everything else will fall to the side. When you go forward with that, that's absolutely wonderful. But, Abdul, reflecting back on your journey, from the very beginning when you were joining Engro all the way to ALSAFA Foods and the way the business has grown to what it is today, there has been a lot of uncertainty. I think the first time you and I had a discussion, the first thing I said was, wow, there's been so many dark rooms that you've walked into and so many decisions that you've made, based on trust and people and then your own gut guidance that you've spoken about. How have you managed, uncertainty? How have you not only survived, but thrived in the face of so much uncertainty?
I think one cannot go through all these challenges alone. You need a lot of support group. And I have been very fortunate. I mean, I have a very supporting family, wife specifically. So, for example, when we started this ALSAFA, when I acquired the business, so we had to compromise on our lifestyle. And she was very much willing to do that, and she did that. So the pain you feel in those transitions, it's somewhat reduced if you have that kind of support group. And then also, I mean, I must say that I've been very fortunate to have a group of friends, my closest circle. They have always been very motivating, and they have, even when I was tending to lose faith in me, they would sort of come and reinstate that faith in myself. So I would say having a very strong support group is very important, and also having having an eye on a bigger perspective, and which is much bigger than you, which is much bigger than your own project, much bigger than on your own company. So if you sometimes I use a mental model, what is the worst thing can happen? So as long as that worst thing is not happening, so everything is less than that, so I'm relatively comfortable. So in that moment in time, there is a lot of stress, but relatively I'm comfortable. So I'm always trying to avoid the worst case scenario. But I think it is, in hindsight, all the dots connect with each other. But in those moments, it becomes, it is very difficult to see that path. And I think the help of others, your friends and family, it comes very handy. So that was my go-to option. My wife, my friends, whenever I was in those dark alleys.
That's wonderful. And, we've just got a couple of minutes, and, I think the audience in the chat also is seeking a little bit of advice from you. And so, Abdul, before you leave, what advice would you give to budding entrepreneurs who are now grappling with uncertainty on a daily basis? So no longer just, uncertainty at certain points in time in your life, but every day is a new day and every day is a new challenge. What would you say to them?
I think the way I see it, and I mean, no matter how big you are, this never changes. And I think it's a tested formula that whatever the task is at hand, give your best and do your best. And I mean, just live that day to your fullest, and give your best of the effort, best of the hard work. And it is not necessary that you would materialize the opportunity, that specific opportunity that you are pursuing at the moment. The opportunities, it has its own way of coming to you or finding you. But as long as you are doing your best on any given task at hand or any given day, one thing is that you will be satisfied with your own self. So you can live with your own self, no matter the project is successful or not, but you can live with your own self, which is much more important than a successful project. And this specific project that you are working on might not be successful, but there would be something else which could be much bigger successful, and which is probably a much bigger opportunity for you. So I would say to all the entrepreneurs, including myself, that give your best to the tasks you have at hand, and opportunities will find you. Yeah, that's what I would say.
That's absolutely wonderful, and thank you so much. It's an emotional story, I will say. I think a lot of us can connect to it deeply because we have been in those situations where we are unable to even trust ourselves with the decision we make. And so, to close off, I'm going to restate a quote that you've just said, which is, I couldn't see the staircase, but I saw the stair. And, I think that can really be the theme and the takeaway from this entire session, that when you see the stair, like you said, give your best and move forward. And, with that, I would really like to thank you for coming here, for being so honest with us, for letting us into your world and showing us that we too can acquire those skills and make those relationships if, we can just give our best and move forward. Thank you to Paklaunch. Thank you to Activate, to everyone involved in, making this a reality. And yeah, this was a gym chat session with Abdul Munim Sheikh. And thank you so much to everyone who attended.
Thanks, Anam. Thanks, Ali and Paklaunch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Allah Hafiz.
Okay.